The whispers came first. Then clarity washed over Betty's 8-year-old mind like a tidal wave, as foreign syllables transformed into perfect meaning. She turned to her mother with wide eyes, tugging at the black uniform sleeve while the two Chinese businessmen continued their conversation, unaware the child had deciphered every word. Heather Wilson checked her reflection in the staff bathroom mirror, straightening her bow tie while her daughter watched with curious eyes. 27 years old with only $26 in her account, until next week's paycheck. She had no choice but to bring Betty to tonight's elite Philadelphia gala. Remember, stay in the kitchen corner, color quietly, and don't talk to the guests, Heather instructed, kneeling to smooth her daughter's simple blue dress. This job pays triple my normal rate. Enough for next month's rent, and maybe even that science kit you wanted. Betty nodded solemnly, clutching her small backpack of activities while thinking about the strange thing that happened yesterday at the grocery store. The Polish grandmother had been muttering to herself in her native language, and suddenly Betty understood every complaint about American bread prices. Head chef Boris raised an eyebrow at the child hiding behind Heather's legs, but quickly softened when she explained her babysitter had canceled last minute. Fine, but keep her out of sight. These high society types don't want to see staff children at their fancy charity events. Heather rushed between tables with practiced grace, balancing champagne flutes while memorizing faces of Philadelphia's elite attending the Children's Hospital fundraiser. Her eyes lingered momentarily on the striking man at table 12, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing attention from everyone in the ballroom. Betty sat quietly in her designated corner, drawing pictures while occasionally glancing at the bustling kitchen staff preparing elegant dishes. She noticed how everyone seemed nervous when serving the handsome man at table 12, their hands slightly trembling as they approached him. The night progressed smoothly until Betty grew restless and wandered from her hiding spot, trailing silently behind the dessert cart as it rolled toward the main ballroom. The glittering chandeliers and swirling gowns captivated her attention as she ducked beneath a tablecloth to watch the spectacle unnoticed. Through the forest of expensive shoes and trailing gowns, Betty spotted her mother delivering drinks to table 12, where the important man sat surrounded by serious-faced associates. Something about their rigid posture made Betty's skin prickle with unease despite their polite smiles. From her hidden vantage point, Betty observed two waiters she hadn't seen before enter from a side door, their movements stiff and purposeful, unlike the fluid grace of the regular staff. They exchanged quick glances before approaching table 12 with a special bottle wrapped in an expensive-looking cloth. When they began speaking in rapid Sicilian while pouring a special glass for the important man, Betty froze as their foreign words suddenly became crystal clear in her mind. Once he drinks this, the boss is dead, and the Russians take control of Philadelphia by morning, the taller waiter whispered with chilling certainty. Betty's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched in horror, the assassin's plan unfolding in slow motion before her eyes. Without thinking, she scrambled from beneath the table and darted across the polished floor, ignoring shocked gasps from the elegant guests. "Don't drink it!" she screamed, lunging toward table 12 where the powerful man was raising the champagne flute to his lips. "They put something in it. They said you'd die if you drink it." The room fell into stunned silence as all eyes turned toward the small girl in the blue dress, her cheeks flushed with exertion and fear. Betty pointed frantically at the two waiters who were already backing toward the exit, their faces twisted with rage at the unexpected interruption. The man at table 12 slowly lowered his glass, dark eyes shifting from the trembling child to the retreating waiters with calculated precision. In one fluid motion, he stood and signaled to two suits by the door, who immediately blocked the exits, his expression never changing despite the chaos erupting around him. Security descended swiftly, surrounding the table as the important man, whom Betty heard someone address as Mr. Corvino, calmly instructed a guard to test the drink. The chemical detection strip turned an alarming shade of purple within seconds, confirming the deadly poison that would have stopped his heart instantly. Heather pushed through the crowd with wild panic in her eyes, dropping to her knees beside Betty and clutching her close. "I'm so sorry about my daughter, sir," she stammered, avoiding direct eye contact with the intimidating figure whose life her child had just saved. "Mr." Corvino studied them both with piercing intensity, his angular face betraying no emotion as security dragged the struggling assassins away. "How did your daughter know what was being said?" he asked in a surprisingly gentle voice, crouching down to Betty's eye level. Betty shrank against her mother's side, suddenly shy under the scrutiny of so many stares. "I heard them talking in a different language, but I understood the words somehow," she whispered, her small voice barely audible above the murmuring crowd. Heather stroked her daughter's hair protectively, trying to mask her own confusion and fear. She's always been special with languages, picks them up instantly. But this is different, she explained hesitantly, sensing that providing honest answers was critical to their safety. A remarkable gift, Mr. Corvino commented, a hint of genuine warmth breaking through his stoic exterior. He turned to address his associates with quiet authority, ordering the ballroom cleared of guests, while maintaining a reassuring smile for Betty's benefit. Within minutes, the grand space had emptied, except for Mr. Corvino's security team, the catering staff, and several serious men in expensive suits discussing the situation in hushed tones. Heather held Betty's hand tightly, unsure whether they were being protected or detained. "Please join me, Mr. Corvino gestured toward a private alcove away from prying ears, his invitation clearly not optional despite its polite delivery. "I believe I owe this brave young lady my life, and I never leave debts unpaid." The private alcove featured plush seating and soft lighting, creating an intimate space that contrasted sharply with the tension filling the air. Mr. Corvino's security chief whispered something urgent in his ear before departing, leaving them in an uncomfortable silence broken only by distant police sirens. Heather shifted nervously, acutely aware of her waitress uniform and the vast social chasm between them as Mr. Corvino, whom she now recognized as Auguste Corvino, the reclusive real estate magnate with rumored connections to organized crime, studied them intently. "We should go," she murmured, rising halfway from her seat, only to be halted by his raised hand. "The men who tried to kill me tonight work for the Bratva, Russian Mafia," August explained with surprising candor, his dark eyes fixed on Betty with undisguised curiosity. "Their boss has been trying to take my territory for months, and tonight they nearly succeeded because I wasn't careful enough." For several heartbeats, the only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning and Betty's soft breathing as August seemed to contemplate a significant decision. "Your extraordinary daughter just changed the course of a war, Ms." He paused, waiting for Heather to fill the silence with her name. "Wilson," she supplied hesitantly, instinctively pulling Betty closer as understanding dawned that they had unwittingly stumbled into something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. "Heather Wilson, and this is my daughter Betty. The Russians now know your faces," August stated matter-of-factly, his tone grave as he leaned forward with clasped hands. "Which means you're both in considerable danger until this situation is resolved permanently." Heather's face paled as the implications of August's words sank in, her grip on Betty's shoulder tightening protectively. "We're just ordinary people. Surely they wouldn't bother with us," she protested, though the certainty in his expression extinguished her hope before it could fully form. "These men don't leave witnesses, especially child witnesses who can understand their plans regardless of what language they speak," August explained gently, his attention shifting to Betty with undisguised fascination. "How long have you been able to understand languages you've never learned?" Betty fidgeted with the hem of her dress, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. "It started about 6 months ago with our neighbor who speaks German. I heard her talking to her sister on the phone, and suddenly I could understand everything they said." August nodded thoughtfully, processing this information while his phone buzzed with incoming messages that he ignored completely. "My security team has already detained 3 Russian associates in the parking garage. They were waiting for confirmation of my death," he revealed with chilling casualness. Heather felt the room tilt slightly as the gravity of their situation became clearer with each passing minute. "What happens to us now?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady for Betty's sake, while her mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. "First, we relocate you somewhere safe. My penthouse has excellent security and is unknown to my enemies," August decided, already typing instructions to his team. "By morning, I'll have a more permanent solution arranged for your protection." Betty watched him curiously, her young mind somehow sensing the complex calculations happening behind his composed exterior. "You're not really just a businessman, are you?" she asked innocently, causing a rare smile to flicker across August's stern features. "Perceptive child," he remarked approvingly, meeting Betty's gaze with newfound respect. "Let's just say I have varied interests across Philadelphia that require particular management skills." The relative calm was shattered when August's security chief burst into the alcove, his usually impassive face tight with urgency. "Sir, we've intercepted communications. They've deployed a second team to ensure the job is completed," he reported tersely, pointedly glancing at Heather and Betty. August was on his feet instantly, all pretense of casual conversation abandoned as he issued rapid commands to his security team through a discreet earpiece. "Change of plans. We move now. Full protective detail," he ordered, gesturing for Heather and Betty to follow him immediately. As they hurried through a hidden service corridor, Betty suddenly clutched her mother's hand, whispering urgently, "Someone's speaking Sicilian again. 2 people behind the kitchen door." August stopped immediately at her words, signaling his guards to investigate with silent hand gestures. Within seconds, gunshots echoed through the corridor as August's men neutralized the threat, confirming Betty's warning with grim efficiency. Heather stifled a scream, covering Betty's ears while August regarded the child with newfound appreciation for her extraordinary ability. "Your daughter's gift may have saved us twice tonight," August murmured to Heather, as they were quickly escorted to an armored SUV waiting at the service entrance. "She might be the most valuable asset in this city right now." Through the tinted windows, Betty watched Philadelphia's glittering skyline blur past, her small hand still clutching her mother's, as she processed the terrifying, yet exhilarating events of the evening. Something fundamental had shifted in their lives, and despite her youth, she understood they could never return to the way things were before. August Corvino's penthouse sprawled across the top floor of the most exclusive building in Philadelphia, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city he effectively controlled. Betty pressed her small palm against the cool glass, marveling at the twinkling lights below while her mother paced nervously behind her. "Your daughter's ability isn't just unusual, it's unprecedented," Dr. Preston remarked, closing his medical bag after examining Betty. "I've worked with linguistic prodigies before, but instantaneous comprehension of unlearned languages defies current scientific understanding." Heather sank onto the luxurious sofa, exhaustion finally catching up as the adrenaline ebbed from her system. "She's always been bright, but this started 6 months ago after a high fever. I thought she was just good with languages," she explained, watching Betty explore the lavish apartment with childlike curiosity. August's phone buzzed continuously as reports flowed in from his network across the city. 3 more Russian operatives captured, surveillance established around Heather's modest apartment building, and intelligence suggesting the Bratva leadership remained unaware their assassination plot had failed. The power balance hung precariously in limbo, dependent on maintaining the illusion of normalcy. "My men intercepted this at your apartment," August said, handing Heather a crudely written note in Russian. "They were already looking for you. This confirms they know about Betty's ability and consider her a significant threat to their operations." Betty wandered back from the window, drawn by the tension in adult voices. "I could help you understand what they're saying if you need me to," she offered innocently, unaware of the strategic value her extraordinary gift represented in the ongoing power struggle between criminal organizations. Heather shook her head firmly, maternal protectiveness overriding everything else. "Absolutely not. She's a child, not a weapon in your war," she snapped at August, momentarily forgetting who she was addressing until his intense gaze locked with hers. Instead of the anger she expected, something softer flickered across August's face. Respect, perhaps even admiration. "You're right," he conceded with surprising humility, crouching to Betty's level. "You've been very brave, but your only job now is to stay safe while the adults handle this situation." The temporary peace shattered when August's security chief burst through the door, his normally composed demeanor fractured by urgency. "They've compromised Officer Simmons. We have a leak in the police department," he reported tensely, eyeing the civilians with obvious concern about speaking freely. "Tell me," August commanded, his posture shifting subtly into something more dangerous as he moved protectively closer to Heather and Betty. "Whatever it is, they need to know the reality of what we're facing." The security chief nodded grimly, lowering his voice despite the soundproofed walls. "The Russians believe you survived their attempt, but are weakened. They're planning to strike all your businesses simultaneously tomorrow to force you into the open, using civilian casualties as leverage." Heather gasped, her hand finding Betty's shoulder instinctively as the implications became clear. Dozens, possibly hundreds of innocent people would die in this power play. "You have to warn them. Evacuate the buildings," she urged, her previous distrust temporarily forgotten in the face of impending tragedy. August's expression hardened into something terrifying, yet oddly reassuring, the face of a man accustomed to impossible decisions with lives hanging in the balance. "I'll do better than warn them," he stated with quiet intensity. "I'll end this tonight." Betty tugged suddenly at August's sleeve, her small face serious beyond her years. "The man who was watching us from the building across the street," He was talking to someone on the phone in Sicilian about a tracker, she revealed, pointing toward the window where she'd been standing earlier. In a blur of controlled violence, August's security team sprang into action, sweeping the room with electronic detection equipment until they discovered the miniature tracking device hidden in the lining of Betty's backpack. The sophisticated Russian technology confirmed their worst fears. The enemy was closer than they'd realized. The helicopter landed on August's secondary property, a sprawling estate outside city limits, surrounded by dense forest and state-of-the-art security systems. Betty watched with wide eyes as armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their silhouettes barely visible in the pre-dawn light filtering through bulletproof windows. "You'll be safe here," August assured them, leading Heather and Betty through the elegant great room toward a wing specially prepared for their arrival. "My most trusted people are handling the situation in Philadelphia while we remain off-grid until the immediate threat is neutralized." Heather noted how different August appeared in this environment, less the polished businessman and more the strategic commander, issuing orders with quiet authority while maintaining constant awareness of their surroundings. She found herself oddly comforted by his competence despite the circumstances that had brought them together. Over breakfast prepared by August's private chef, Betty surprised everyone by addressing August in flawless Sicilian, perfectly mimicking his native dialect after hearing only fragments of phone conversations. "You speak like your grandfather did," she commented innocently, unaware of the profound effect her words had on the typically stoic man. August froze momentarily. Memories of his Sicilian grandfather, the family patriarch who had established their American foothold decades ago, washing over him unexpectedly. "How could you possibly know that?" he asked softly, genuine emotion cracking through his carefully maintained facade. "The way your words flow. It's old-fashioned, like books instead of streets," Betty explained with childlike simplicity, happily spreading jam on her toast, while inadvertently forging a deeper connection with their dangerous protector. "It's beautiful, like music with words." August studied the remarkable child with newfound appreciation, witnessing not just her linguistic gift, but her inherent emotional intelligence that somehow perceived the human beneath his carefully constructed armor. "My grandfather would have liked you," he acknowledged with rare warmth, a genuine smile softening his features. Later that morning, August received the first reports of coordinated strikes against Russian operations throughout Philadelphia, his preemptive response to their planned attack disrupting their organization at multiple levels simultaneously. Heather overheard enough to understand the deadly chess game unfolding in their absence, civilians unwittingly moving through streets that had become a battleground for criminal empires. "Is this really your life?" Heather asked quietly, when they found themselves momentarily alone, Betty having been escorted to the library by August's housekeeper. "Constantly fighting, hurting people, living behind walls of security and violence?" August considered her question with surprising thoughtfulness, absently rotating the heavy signet ring that marked his status within his organization. "It's the life I inherited and learned to excel at," he answered honestly, something in Heather's direct gaze compelling his candor where threats would have failed. "And you never wanted something different?" she pressed, unintimidated by his reputation in a way few people had ever been. "Something normal, friends who aren't afraid of you, relationships based on more than power and obligation." A shadow crossed August's face, revealing a glimpse of the path not taken, a vulnerability she hadn't expected from someone so formidable. "What I want stopped mattering a long time ago," he replied, the bitterness in his voice tempered by resignation to choices made years before. The moment of unexpected intimacy was interrupted by August's security chief arriving with crucial intelligence. The Russian leadership had requested an emergency meeting to negotiate terms following the devastating counterattack. The balance of power had shifted decisively, creating an opportunity to end the conflict before more blood was shed. "I should return to the city," August declared, already mentally calculating risks and advantages as he prepared to leverage his strengthened position. "You'll remain here under maximum security until I've confirmed the threat has been permanently resolved." Heather felt an unexpected surge of concern at the thought of August facing his enemies alone, the man who had risked everything to protect her daughter, suddenly seeming strangely vulnerable despite his power. "Be careful," she said simply, surprising herself with the genuine sentiment behind her words. August paused at the doorway, momentarily disarmed by her concern, a foreign experience for someone accustomed to fear or obedience, rather than authentic worry for his welfare. "I always am," he promised, with unexpected gentleness, his gaze lingering on her face before he departed. 3 days passed in tense waiting, the sprawling estate eerily quiet save for security updates and Betty's cheerful exploration of the extensive library where she discovered books in a dozen languages. Heather found herself constantly checking the driveway, anxiety growing with each passing hour without word from August. "You're worried about him," Betty observed perceptively, curled beside her mother on a window seat overlooking the manicured gardens, where armed guards maintained their vigilant patrol. "I can tell by how you keep looking at the road and checking your phone." Heather sighed, unable to deny the truth in her daughter's assessment, or the confusing emotions developing toward the dangerous man who had upended their lives. "It's complicated, sweetie," she admitted, absently stroking Betty's hair, while wrestling with feelings she hadn't anticipated. The distant rumble of vehicles approaching broke the afternoon stillness, security teams confirming August's arrival via encrypted radio channels, moments before his motorcade appeared through the trees. Heather tried to ignore the relief washing over her as she recognized his tall figure emerging from the lead car, moving with the same confident grace despite visible fatigue. August found them in the library, his normally impeccable appearance slightly rumpled from days of high-stakes negotiation. "It's over," he announced without preamble, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "The Russians have agreed to withdraw from Philadelphia entirely in exchange for certain concessions elsewhere." Betty launched herself forward in a spontaneous hug that momentarily stunned August, his arms awkwardly returning the child's embrace while meeting Heather's gaze over her head. "You came back," Betty stated simply, her trust in him apparently absolute, despite knowing fragments of his dangerous reality. "I promised I would," August replied, something in his expression suggesting the significance of keeping this particular promise extended beyond professional obligation. "And we have arrangements to discuss about your future." Heather tensed, bracing herself for whatever life-altering decisions had been made on their behalf during the power negotiations. "What kind of arrangements?" she asked cautiously, years of struggling alone making her wary of solutions that seemed too convenient. "Legitimate ones," August assured her, correctly interpreting her concerns. "A position at my charitable foundation with housing provided in a secure building, excellent schools for Betty, and protection from my security team, until we're certain no threat remains from former Russian associates." The offer was generous beyond anything Heather could have imagined. Financial security, safety, opportunities for Betty's extraordinary abilities to be nurtured properly, yet something in August's carefully neutral expression suggested there was more behind the proposal than mere obligation or strategic advantage. "And what do you get from this arrangement?" she questioned directly, unwilling to accept charity regardless of their circumstances. "I'm not interested in being indebted to anyone, no matter how well-intentioned the help might seem." August's expression softened unexpectedly, the calculated businessman momentarily replaced by something more genuine. "Your perspective," he answered honestly, surprising them both. "In 3 days, you've questioned decisions I've made unthinkingly for years, challenged assumptions about what's necessary versus what's merely convenient for maintaining power." Their conversation was interrupted by August's security chief bringing urgent news. FBI agents were investigating connections between recent violence in Philadelphia and established crime families, focusing particularly on August's organization, despite his careful maintenance of legitimate business fronts for decades. "We need to accelerate the separation of my legitimate enterprises from the other operations," August declared, already formulating contingency plans. "Starting with the foundation where Heather will be working, it needs to be completely clean, beyond reproach or suspicion." Betty, who had been quietly observing the adults from her corner of the library sofa, suddenly spoke up with characteristic directness. "You should just stop doing the bad things completely," she suggested, her childlike moral clarity cutting through complex justifications with devastating simplicity. August stared at her for a long moment, something profound shifting behind his eyes, as he considered her words without immediate dismissal. "It's not quite that simple when you've lived this life as long as I have," he explained gently, without the condescension adults typically offered children discussing complex issues. "Why not?" Betty persisted, her innocent question containing a challenge that centuries of moral philosophy had struggled to answer satisfactorily. "If you know something is wrong, you stop doing it. That's what Mom always teaches me." Heather watched a silent transformation occur as August considered Betty's question with unexpected seriousness. The hardened crime boss confronted with essential truth delivered through a child's uncompromising perspective. "Your daughter might be wiser than all my advisors combined," he acknowledged with a rueful smile. The next morning brought another surprise, as August presented his comprehensive transition plan, a strategic withdrawal from illicit operations, consolidation of legitimate businesses, and careful negotiation with rival organizations to maintain stability during the power shift. The blueprint for transformation, that would have seemed impossible days earlier now, lay methodically outlined on his desk. It won't happen overnight, August cautioned, realistic about the challenges ahead, despite his newfound determination. Some operations can't simply be abandoned without consequences. People depend on the protection and employment we provide, regardless of legality. Heather nodded, recognizing the complexity of extracting oneself from systems built over generations, appreciating his honesty where empty promises would have been easier. But you're actually going to try, she observed, the statement somewhere between question and acknowledgement of the significant shift in his thinking. Autumn leaves danced across the courtyard of the secure apartment complex where Heather and Betty had lived for the past month under August's protection. Their new home blended elegant comfort with subtle security features, allowing a semblance of normalcy while maintaining vigilance. Betty thrived at her new private school, where her extraordinary linguistic abilities earned admiration from teachers who believed she was merely a dedicated polyglot. The trauma of that fateful gala night had faded somewhat, replaced by excitement of educational opportunities her mother could never have afforded before. Heather found unexpected fulfillment in her foundation work, her practical experience helping struggling families, bringing authentic perspective to programs. August visited weekly, ostensibly for foundation business, but increasingly lingering for conversations that stretched late into evening after Betty had gone to bed. The delicate peace shattered one Tuesday afternoon when Heather received an urgent call from Betty's school. Her daughter never arrived for afternoon classes. Security footage showed a maintenance van with false credentials approaching the playground before the recording mysteriously terminated. August arrived within minutes of Heather's panicked call, the normally composed crime boss radiating controlled fury as he mobilized every resource at his disposal. "We'll find her," he promised, gripping Heather's shoulders with fierce determination, while his security team established a command center. "It's the Belarusian faction," August's intelligence chief confirmed, after tracking the maintenance van through traffic cameras. "They're attempting to position themselves as successors to the Russians we forced out, proving their reach by targeting those under your direct protection." A phone call came through on Heather's personal number. Untraceable, the caller speaking fluent Sicilian with deliberate clarity intended for Betty to understand. "Your daughter is unharmed for now," the accented voice stated coldly. "She will remain so if Corvino abandons his territories east of Broad Street by midnight." August's expression remained impassive during the call played on speaker, only the whitening of his knuckles betraying the rage building beneath his controlled exterior. "They've made two critical mistakes," he stated with deadly calm once the connection terminated, "underestimating how far I'll go to protect what's mine." Betty sat alone in a windowless room, her inherent bravery wavering as hours passed with only brief visits from masked men speaking various languages. Her small fingers traced patterns on the concrete floor, forming words in different alphabets as she mentally cataloged everything she heard. Across the city, August operated with cold precision unlike anything Heather had witnessed before, leveraging decades of underworld connections and calling in favors from unlikely allies. The hunt narrowed to abandoned industrial properties along the Delaware River waterfront, satellite imagery eliminating possibilities one by one. "I'm coming with you," Heather insisted when the assault team prepared to move, her expression brooking no argument despite August's immediate objection. "She's my daughter, and she'll be terrified. She needs to see me first, not armed men she doesn't recognize." August recognized the unshakable determination in her eyes, the same fierce protectiveness he'd witnessed at their first meeting, and nodded tersely, instructing his security chief to equip her with a bulletproof vest. His personal concern extended beyond strategic considerations in ways neither acknowledged directly. The warehouse loomed dark against the night sky, seemingly abandoned but for subtle indicators of recent activity detected by thermal imaging drones deployed moments before their arrival. August's team moved with practiced efficiency, disabling perimeter security systems with silent precision. Heather's heart pounded painfully as she waited in the reinforced vehicle, watching August check his weapon with mechanical efficiency, before meeting her gaze with unexpected gentleness. "I'm bringing her back to you," he promised quietly, the words carrying weight beyond professional obligation. The warehouse extraction succeeded beyond expectation. August's team recovered Betty unharmed, while capturing key members of the Belarusian organization. Betty showed remarkable composure throughout, providing crucial intelligence about conversations she had overheard during her captivity. They have someone inside your security team, she reported solemnly once safely home, her small hand clutching her mother's while maintaining unwavering eye contact with August. The tall man with the scar spoke on the phone about getting regular updates from someone called Wraith. August's expression darkened dangerously, the betrayal cutting deep after years built on loyalty and shared history within his organization. "You're absolutely certain about this?" he asked gently, careful not to pressure the child despite the critical implications of her revelation. Betty nodded without hesitation, her reliability as a witness bolstered by her perfect recall of conversations in multiple languages that perfectly corroborated intelligence gathered through other channels. August exchanged meaningful glances with his security chief, silent communication flowing between them. The following weeks brought dramatic changes as August accelerated his transition plan, systematically dismantling criminal operations while strengthening legitimate businesses. The betrayal had catalyzed his determination to create something that wouldn't require constant vigilance against enemies. Heather found herself increasingly involved in strategic discussions, her practical perspective and ethical clarity providing balance to August's pragmatic efficiency. Late-night planning sessions in her apartment became commonplace, Betty often falling asleep on the sofa while the adults talked. "Why are you really doing this?" Heather asked one evening after Betty had been tucked into bed, the question hanging between them as autumn rain tapped gently against windows. "The truth, August, not the practical justifications you explained to your lieutenants." August considered her question with characteristic thoughtfulness, absently rotating the signet ring that symbolized generations of family power. "Initially, survival, adapting to changing circumstances," he admitted, his gaze fixed on distant memories. "But now, something different, something I haven't felt entitled to consider since I was very young." The unspoken connection between them intensified in the comfortable silence that followed, neither rushing to define the gradual transformation of their relationship from reluctant allies to something more complex. August found himself sharing childhood stories he'd buried decades ago. "It's not too late to choose differently," Heather suggested softly, her hand finding his across the table in a gesture of support rather than romance, though the distinction grew increasingly blurred. "You've built something powerful. Why not redirect it completely toward something you can be proud of?" The tender moment shattered when August's phone buzzed with urgent news. Federal indictments were being prepared against his organization based on evidence supplied by a confidential informant. The betrayal extended beyond his security team into law enforcement circles he'd believed secure. "You need to distance yourself from me immediately," August declared, already calculating contingencies as he prepared to leave. "The foundation, your position, Betty's school, all legitimate, all protected if my legal troubles don't contaminate them through association." Heather caught his arm as he rose, her expression fierce with determination matching his own. "We're not disposable assets you can reallocate when circumstances change," she challenged, the first time she'd directly confronted his habit of unilateral decision-making. August stared at her in momentary shock before unexpected laughter broke through his tension, genuine amusement at being so thoroughly called out. "You're right," he conceded, resuming his seat with newfound respect. "What do you suggest?" Their collaborative solution emerged through hours of discussion. Accelerated legal separation of legitimate businesses, strategic cooperation with specific law enforcement agencies, and careful documentation of August's active transition away from criminal activities. The federal courthouse steps swarmed with reporters when August emerged, following his testimony against the Belarusian organization, his immunity deal contingent upon comprehensive information about rival criminal enterprises rather than his own operations. Photographers captured his composed expression as he navigated the media gauntlet. "The vultures are loving this," remarked Special Agent Bryce, the pragmatic FBI veteran who had constructed August's controversial cooperation agreement against significant internal opposition. Former crime boss destroying competitors while reinventing himself as a corporate philanthropist. "It's either the best redemption story in Philadelphia history or the most elaborate criminal evolution." August maintained his diplomatic smile for the cameras while mentally calculating the strategic advantages gained through selective cooperation, protection for his legitimate businesses, established relationships with law enforcement, and most importantly, safety for Heather and Betty. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, August Charitable Foundation hosted its annual fundraiser in the same ballroom where Betty had first saved his life. The event showcased impressive results from community programs designed with Heather's input, educational initiatives, housing assistance, and employment opportunities. Betty circulated confidently among guests in her new role as unofficial language ambassador, impressing international donors with conversation in their native tongues, while carefully maintaining the cover story that she studied languages conventionally. At 11 years old, she understood the importance of protecting her ability from those who might exploit it. "She's remarkable," August observed, watching Betty charm a Japanese technology magnate with perfect linguistic etiquette that bridged cultural barriers effortlessly. Not just the languages, but her resilience through everything that's happened. "She gets that from you." Heather accepted the compliment with a gentle smile, her hand resting comfortably in the crook of August's arm in a public acknowledgement of their evolving relationship. "And her strategic thinking comes from spending too much time around you," she countered affectionately. The evening reached its pinnacle when August took the stage for his keynote address, the former shadow power now stepping fully into public leadership, with carefully curated transparency about his business evolution. "Second chances aren't given. They're created through deliberate choices and consistent actions that demonstrate genuine change," he stated. Across the city, the final phase of August's transformation unfolded simultaneously, his remaining lieutenants implementing the complete dissolution of criminal operations following months of careful preparation. Properties transferred to community development corporations, illicit income streams redirected to legitimate ventures. August considered the observation thoughtfully, memories of his intimidating father momentarily shadowing his expression. "He built what he knew how to build in the world he understood," he replied without judgment. "We're living in a different world with different possibilities. Adapting is just good business." Later that evening, August found quiet moment with Heather on the ballroom terrace, the city lights spreading below them like a reflection of the stars above. "I received the final paperwork today. All criminal operations officially terminated. Remaining assets transferred to legitimate holdings," he revealed quietly. Heather studied his profile in the moonlight, noting the lightness that had gradually replaced the constant vigilance he once carried. "Regrets?" she asked gently, understanding the magnitude of abandoning an identity and power structure that had defined his existence since childhood. August turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his with unexpected vulnerability. "Only the wasted years before Betty's extraordinary gift brought you both into my life," he admitted, the hardened crime boss completely transformed by love that had grown steadily through shared challenges. The Foundation Gala concluded with unprecedented fundraising success, corporate partnerships established, and political connections solidified as August's reinvention gained widespread acceptance among Philadelphia's elite. The narrative of redemption proved compelling to a society eager for positive transformation stories. Betty yawned as they rode home in August's car, her head nodding against her mother's shoulder after the excitement of the evening. "Are we a real family now?" she asked sleepily, the innocent question piercing straight to the heart of what had developed between the adults over months. 1 year to the day after their lives intersected so dramatically, August knelt in the private garden of his transformed estate, holding a simple platinum ring that represented not ownership, but partnership between equals. "I can't promise a normal life," he acknowledged honestly, "but I can promise every resource I possess will be dedicated to your happiness." The intimate wedding took place in the same garden weeks later, attended only by Betty and their closest allies from both worlds. Betty performed her proudest role as translator for August's elderly Sicilian relatives, her gift bringing together disparate parts of their unusual family. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, as your support is important for me to continue creating content here.